How we doing, everyone? Happy Tuesday. I know we just hit 12 o'clock, so we'll give everyone maybe another 30 seconds here and we'll kick this off. All right, sounds good. Should we do it, Kevin?
Let's do it.
All right, so welcome to our third monthly power session. It's hosted by ProNovos. We're with our product manager, Kevin. He was on for week one, so welcome back. And we'll be talking about the monthly cost forecasting. So we'll kind of give you the floor, Kevin, and let you take it away, and we'll start from the top here. And I see we opened up the cost forecast within a project, and we navigate over to the timeline tab.
Yeah, so basically once you do your cost forecast kind of at the adjustment level, right? So now you've gone through each of your line items, you've made your adjustments, you have that projected final cost of what do you think you're going to spend on the project. Now the $1 million question is, okay, we know what we're going to spend, but when are we going to spend it? And that's really what this timeline view is important. And it's really important, obviously, in the construction industry, because that's typically what drives our revenue recognition, right? Revenue is recognized by percent complete. Percent complete is basically a function of when your costs come in versus your projected final cost. So once you've got that projected final cost, then next step then is to kind of forecast month over month when you think those costs will occur.
Excellent. So I see we have some high level KPIs there to take note of, and then you want to kind of walk us through the chart on the right?
Yeah, so like you said, the KPIs here. So this again speaks directly to that revenue recognition process. So we want to know what our contract amount is. We want to know what our percent complete. That gives us our revenue to date. We then know what our backlog is, contract minus revenue, and then our job cost to date. And then here's the projected final cost. So this is what we finalized on the adjustment tab. And then here's our cost to complete. And then this projected cost to complete. This is basically telling you a summary of how you're forecasting your cost month over month below, and you want to make sure that that forecasted cost to complete matches your actual cost to complete. So that's kind of a high level what each of the KPIs are. And then this chart on the right, it's a really good visual to kind of tell you how the project is unfolding. So this blue line right here, this represents your actual cost to date. And then this dash line that it continues. So once it goes from the solid blue line to the dash blue line, this is where you get into your forecasted cost. And then down below this solid black, or I'm sorry, this dash black line, this is your forecasted cost. So you can see this is a demo project. We didn't come in here and start doing any forecasting until the last month, July. So that's why you see it 0. But if you are forecasting from the very beginning of the project, it gives you a really good kind of picture of how are your actual costs stacking up against the forecast amount. So it really tells you, hey, am I behind schedule? Am I ahead of schedule? Am I right in line with what I expected my cost curve to look like?
That's great. I like that visual. And it looks like I have the ability to zoom in there a little bit if I want as well.
Yep. So you can do a couple cool things here. You can zoom in to kind of key into a certain area. The other nice one here is if you just want to look at, the actuals, or if you just want to look at the projection, you've got the ability to use this legend here to basically turn on either of the series.
Perfect. Understood. Well, I guess we can kind of move down there and get to more granular level at the month level here. And I see we can kind of take a look at projected versus actual and whether we're increased or decreasing. And why don't you touch on that a little bit more and the ability to drill down and see the flyout window for that?
Yeah, so this is where you start to get into, okay, we've talked about kind of the macro level view for the project. What does it look like individually month over month? So this is basically going to give you your schedule. So you can see you've got the years for each row here, the months across the top. And basically what it's going to do is it's going to populate all the years and month based on your project schedule. So you can see you can come and change the start date or the end date here. And as you change that start date or end date, you'll either get more or less fields. It's also going to look at when your first cost occurred on the project. So even you can see here, okay, our start date wasn't until January 1st, 2023, but the first time we actually realized cost was in December 2022. So it's still going to show those months that had cost. So that's how the months and the years are going to populate. It's going to be looking at two things: your start and end date for the project, and then the cost, or the first time you have cost. And this start and end date, it's the same start and end date that is populated on your project information window. if you are syncing data from the accounting system and you have a start date or end date, it will populate from there. And then, like I said, you can go in year end, adjust the start date and end date as well. And then what you can see is as we look at each individual month, this top row is going to be what I forecasted for that month. And then the bottom row is going to be the actual. So again, maybe not the best example here because, this one didn't have a forecast going back all the way to 2022. But it's a really good way to kind of see how accurate you are in doing your forecast. I think that's something we see with a lot of project managers is when they do these forecasts, sometimes they're kind of just throwing numbers against the wall. And then they're not going back and looking at, okay, how actually accurate was I when I did that forecast? So it's really good to kind of do that assessment of, did I actually come close to what I projected, or do I kind of need to reevaluate how I'm doing my projections moving forward? And then underneath it, you can kind of see the delta below. So that gives you a real kind of clear indicator of how you're doing on the forecast. These two columns at the end here, what you're going to see is your yearly total. So if I look at 2024, when I consider what my yearly total is going to be, it's going to basically take my actual values for any prior months, right? Once I know what my actual costs are, that's the number I want to moving forward or use moving forward. And then for the current and future months, what it's going to use when calculating that total is going to be my forecasted amount. So this 150,000 number here, what you'll see is it's the actuals of the prior months plus the forecast amount for the current and the future months. And then you got your backlog or your cost to complete here. So based on kind of what your forecasted costs are going into 2025, I've got $120,000 remaining to forecast.
Excellent. Sounds pretty straightforward. I like it.
Yeah.
And then let's take one of those numbers, they're increasing. We have the ability to drill into that.
Yeah, so this is really handy. So what you can do is if any of the prior months, you can kind of click on this number here. And what you're going to do is you're going to get this flyout window where this is actually going to give you a breakdown of what were your costs the prior month, what are your costs the current month, what's that delta. And it's a really good way to kind of get a picture of what your revenue recognition looks like. So it kind of walks you through it, right? You've got your contract, your cost, your profit margin up at the top here. Then you've got your cost to complete, your revenue, your cost, and then your profit. What's really handy is if you hover over any of these formulas here, it's going to highlight the different values that it's using. So this becomes really important when it actually kind of understanding, okay, based on what our cost forecast was, how that's actually driving the revenue recognition. And I'll show you one example here of an old project that really illustrates the importance of making sure you have an accurate forecast. So if I look at this project, what you will see, let me go to the adjustment tab real quick. This was a really good job, right? So I can see that I was originally forecasted a 28.5% profit margin. I actually increased that margin to 30.2%. So not only did I earn a really healthy profit margin on it, but I actually increased based on what I thought it was going to be originally. If I go to my timeline view, one other thing you can do on these charts here is you can look at other different metrics. And if I select profit, one thing I'm going to see is in March to April, I actually have this massive decrease in my profit. So this should never happen on a job where you have such a healthy profit margin. You actually increase the profit margin over the course of the project. So what caused you to have a negative profit in this given month? Well, I can go down here. I was April 2017. I can click into this project and I can see what happened was I increased that projected final cost by 118,000. So because I increased that projected final cost, my percent complete went down. And because my percent complete went down, that means my revenue went down. But at the end of March, I already recognized my revenue based on the prior percent complete. So now I actually need to record a negative revenue in April, which leads to a negative profit for the month. So it's a really good way to kind of get into the nitty-gritty, the math of how is this actually kind of driving your revenue and your profit on the project. And it really also highlights the importance of making sure you have that accurate projected final cost. Because if you don't, like that example we just looked at where we had to increase it by 118,000, it really does affect the bottom line, even on a very healthy project.
Yeah, I love it. I see the graph goes down, but it's nice to know the why, which is always very important. Okay, anything else you want to touch on down there?
Yeah, so I think maybe the last thing to touch on is how to actually go in and update your forecast. So any of these fields for the current and the future months, the line underneath it. That means you can kind of click into it and enter it. So if I can come in here and say, I actually think I'm going to have $15,000 in August, I can update the forecast that way. Or if you don't want to go in and do that manual adjustment, what you can use is these standard curves at the top. So let's say I think it's going to be a very kind of straightforward project. I'm going to spend about the same amount of money each month remaining. I can use this linear forecast. It's going to give me a preview of what that looks like. So I can say I've got about $30,000 in each month. I can save that. Or if I think, it might kind of ramp up and ramp back down, I can use this S curve. So that's typically what we see in construction, right? Projects typically ramp up, they reach a peak, and then they kind of ramp back down as you get to the end. And what's nice with the S curve is you can kind of select the steepness of your curve. So you can either go low, medium, or high. I'm going to use the low one here so you can kind of see how that affects the cost. So since I'm already about more than halfway through the project, you can see I'm at the kind of tail end of the S curve. So I've got 71,000, and then it kind of trickles down for the remainder of the project. So really quick way to kind of start to populate what your forecast is for each month. And then you can kind of, once you use those standard curves, then you can kind of go back and tweak them and say, okay, I think, this subcontractor is going to be on this job site for an extra 2 months, and that's going to increase my cost, so I need to bump it up. But those standard curves, it's a really good way to kind of get started and get a baseline for what you think your cost forecast is going to be.
Perfect. I love it. And I see there's a custom one. How do we go about utilizing that?
Yeah, so the custom one's going to be if I come in here and modify any of these values. So if I say, all right, this is going to be 1,000. Well, now this is no longer a standard S curve or standard linear. So it's going to kind of switch it over to the custom. So the custom kind of means, hey, you've gone up in a year and you've modified what those standard curves are.
Understood. Thank you. Well, it looks like we touched on the graph, the KPIs, and kind of the granular level monthly. Anything else you want to kind of close it out with before we take some questions?
No, I think maybe just to kind of pull back, I think, sometimes it gets lost why this is important. I think a lot of project managers, a lot of project teams, they're used to doing kind of the adjustment side of it, right? What's going to be that projected final cost, but they don't always look at this kind of timeline view of, okay, now what are my costs going to be month over month? And it's really important to do this and make sure it's as accurate as possible, because like we talked about, because of how construction recognizes revenue being on a percent complete, making sure you have an accurate forecast month over month really goes into or plays a big role in making sure that you have an accurate forecast when you put your company level financials together. So I think in one of these future power sessions, we're going to talk about revenue projections, and making sure you have an accurate monthly cost forecast is really the critical part to making sure you have an accurate revenue forecast.
Understood. Yeah, that sounds great. But I guess we got about a minute and a half left here. We'll turn the floor over to the attendees, and if you have any questions, just post it in the chat and we'll get to them. Give another minute here or so, but everyone, thanks for your time. I know the days are busy, but thanks for jumping on and giving us 15 minutes today. And then we'll see you in September for the next one.
Sounds great. All right, everybody.
No one's putting you on the spot today.
Get
off easy today. Yep, we can call it. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
All right. Have a good day, everybody.